I really enjoy a pattern that uses up yardage and scraps. And this one is the perfect pattern for that. I'm deciding which one of these I want to use. The one with the red? Nope, I want to use the one without any red. So I chose the turtles because I like them, and I like, of course, red with blue. I'm cutting them up into 4.5-inch strips to get them ready to go for our pattern. I use this yardage, and all those scraps of red I cut from my scrap bin. The variety of how many scraps you want is up to you. I like a big variety, so I did a lot. I want to make 4 half square triangles, and I'm showing you that if your novelty fabric has characters on it that are big or small, you can decide what is going to show when you do those 4 together. You just decide by folding it in half where you're going to sew it. Okay, is enough of a turtle showing? Do I like that? And if so, use that square. I'm just cutting 4 squares because that's all I need from the novelty fabric. You can be as particular or as not particular as you want when you're doing this. And if you have a novelty fabric that is directional, then you'll want to be really careful to get your direction the direction you want. So I did do one quilt to show you later that was directional, and I had to very carefully put the dogs right side up. But that's how they're going to lay on the quilt, is like I have them laid so that you can see them. We only need 4 half square triangles for this pattern, so it's fairly straightforward. And as you're looking at them, if you want to be particular, and let's say you don't like how one of the motifs is showing, you can cut a new square and waste a little fabric because you can put it in your scrap box and change that motif so that you're happier. There are only 4. This is how we're going to make the half square triangles today. We're just going to press them like you just saw me, so that there's a line going from corner to corner that's a press line, and that's the line we're going to sew on. We want to make 4 half square triangles, and we want them to be exactly the same size as the squares that we've cut. I just sew corner to corner, and then we check, yep, we like the motif, it looks really good. We cut that off, and you know there's a trick that you can sew that and sew the corners, but I'm not going to do that in front of you today. Here we go, it's ready, we press it, we get it, and I measure it because I want to make sure I sewed correctly and it really is going to be 4.5 inches like I want it to be. And yes, magically, mystically, it's wonderful. There are so many ways to make half square triangles, and if you were going to make more, I would make it a different way maybe, but this way is so great if you're just needing, say, 4. This was such a fun pattern that when I started making it, I wanted to just keep making it. I made 3 to show you today. This is me sewing the 4 patch that is the main part of the central design. I picked very carefully which red squares I wanted. I liked how they looked, and I'm just sewing them into 2s, pressing the seams opposite directions, budging those seams together, and making a 4 patch. That's it. So simple. This whole quilt goes together so fast and so simple and is such great design. I pressed this open just because I wanted it to lay really flat in the middle, and it doesn't matter. Some people say it matters how you press your seams, but I wanted it open. It's not going to match anything and it'll lay flatter. I measure it so that I can see, yep, it's perfectly the size it's supposed to be. So I'm going to cut a top and a bottom. And when you have directional, like the doggy print I just showed you, you have to be careful. But with our turtles, it's not directional, so it's not going to matter. I cut the pieces for the top and the bottom, and I press them just because I'm a presser girl, and I get them ready and then quickly sew them on. This is so fast and it's so impactful. A pro tip for this seam is to make sure you sew straight at the beginning and end. Don't go kittywampus. The thing you want to think about as you're choosing your fabrics is to have great contrast. Having great contrast between your novelty fabric and the background fabric that you choose is what makes this pattern really pop. I cut the side pieces so that they're the proper size to go along the side of the main design, and we are well on our way to having this quilt be a work of beauty. I hope you noticed I keep checking measurements, and the reason I do that is when you're making a main motif that has a lot of background pieces, it really is important that your measurements are exact. Check yourself as you go, because if there's a problem, you can fix it as you go. Like if those seams were too small and that piece was too big, I could just sew a little more on the seams and fix it. This is a great beginner quilt for beginners, and it's a great, fun, amazing quilt for a more advanced seamstress. Make sure you press, and it's pressed wide open and very square, because now we get to take our background pieces and you can lay them out and be a complete control freak, which sometimes I am. if you want to balance dark and light, or you can just take all your background pieces over to your sewing machine. And I sew them in twos. I know that I need 4 sections with 4 squares in it. So I'm going to do that many twos so that I can go decide from the twos, and that's enough control for me for this quilt. I know I have lots of different background pieces. If I had less, I might want to lay them out and pin them. But if you're just like a random happy, let's just see what happens girl, then go ahead and just take your background pieces and sew them, and then you can go from there. After I've gone through and sorted and decided which they are, then I've sewn them, and now I press them. I press them open, and I just do one on top of another, and the heat of the iron just presses the ones underneath even better so that they're all really nicely open. Once they're all pressed, I can start laying them out, and then I can look at the balance of light and dark and the contrast and make sure they feel happy to my brain and my eye. Here we go, laying them out. It is wonderful. Okay, now I number them so that I can not have to think and have the rows there, because I do want it that much control. This is a pretty straightforward quilt. You sew the 2 sides, you press them beautifully, you then get them ready. I can take the numbers off and you sew them to the side they belong to. And then now it's sewn. I know, that was magical. I press towards the novelty fabric because there are no seams there. So on both sides, whenever I have a place with no seams, it just lays flatter. Now for the extra fun part. This is where our half square triangles come in, and we set them up where they belong, and then I take my twosies I've sewn together and I decide where I'm happy with those reds to be, and I lay them out and get them ready, because we're going to now sew these 2 sections into just a row. We'll have a row across the top, a row across the bottom. I'm going to pin these together. If you need help with this pattern, you can make it just from watching this, but if you want a paper pattern to hold in your hand, we have one for sale for not much on our website. So if you're interested in having this as a pattern that you can refer to, go ahead and visit us at our website and you can get one for not very much money. Now that we're done with the main motif part of this quilt, we're sewing 8 blocks together in a row. And if you want to lay them out and control them like I just did, go for that. If not, you can just sew them together however you want. We have 1 row on top, 4 rows on bottom. We sew them together, and that is the center of the quilt. And now we're going to work on borders. I do have to sew 2 pieces together to make the long enough border for the side of the quilt, because it's just longer than the regular width of fabric. 4.5 inches, I press it open just because I want it to lay flat. And I didn't sew it at a diagonal. You can, if you'd prefer. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I didn't this time because I didn't want the turtles to be cut in half in a diagonal. So I did it straight. I press it down, I take the quilt, I do the 2 long edges of the quilt, so we're talking the sides of the quilt, and I press it on and pin it so that I can get it ready. This is the press method, and it makes it so you don't have to measure. If you want to measure, then you can measure and do it that way. But I prefer it this way because if you press it and you're careful, it doesn't pull or push. You don't get wavy borders, and it just is more exact for me. And I don't have to worry about any math, because you know me, I don't want to do math. And I sew the borders on, and it really is this simple. You do the side borders. After you're done with the side borders, you do the top and bottom border, and magically, mystically, you have such a great quilt. And like I said, I did this quilt 2 other times so that I can show you the difference. One of my quilts has no contrast. Well, it has some, but not as much. I have 2 with a lot of contrast, and I have 1 with not so much, so that you can see the difference. And it's still a great quilt. This last quilt is directional. If you decide to make one of these, sign up on our website, on our newsletter, and send us pictures so that we can post them for everyone to see. Stay merry and creative.